Welcome back to Chronicles. If you had to guess the absolute deadliest, most devastating battle in U.S. military history, your mind probably jumps straight to the bloody beaches of Normandy, right? Or maybe the dense, unforgiving jungles of Vietnam. What if I told you the military unit with the highest casualty rate wasn't lost in either of those modern wars? In fact, they suffered a near-total, absolute wipeout before the 19th century even began. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Chronicles, because today we're uncovering a hidden historical twist that's going to permanently change how you look at the true cost of war. I want you to imagine the most devastating battle in American history. You're probably picturing massive armies clashing over months of grueling, muddy combat. But the truth? The truth is actually a forgotten mystery. It's the terrifying story of an entire military force practically mathematically erased from existence in a matter of hours. But before we can reveal this ultimate historical twist, we actually need to completely rethink what a military loss even means. So let's look at the hidden cost of war and completely redefine what devastation actually looks like on paper. To really grasp the sheer scale of the slaughter we're building towards today, we first have to ask a pretty basic question. What exactly is a casualty? Look, most people immediately think of soldiers killed in action. But honestly, since at least the year 1513, the official military definition has been way broader. It simply means any soldier who is no longer available for the immediate battle or campaign. This includes the injured, the captured, the missing, or even the deeply traumatized. Basically, a military unit can be completely destroyed as a fighting force without every single soldier losing their life. They are just removed from the fight. Take the American Civil War, for example. During the 7 Days battles in 1862, there was a staggering total of 36,059 casualties between both sides. But when you look closer at the data, only a fraction of those, about 5,228, were actually killed in action. The rest were wounded, missing, or taken prisoner. Now, the overall numbers there are massive, obviously, but this sets the stage for a much, much darker question. What happens when the percentage of a specific unit's loss climbs so unbelievably high that the unit practically ceases to exist? It really comes down to the scale of loss. We have to separate these giant raw numbers from the terrifying reality of complete and total annihilation. In modern conflicts, we always hear about these staggering raw numbers over years and years of fighting. In the Korean War, the 1st Marine Division suffered nearly 30,000 casualties. In the Vietnam War, the 1st Cavalry Division saw over 32,000. These numbers are absolutely heartbreaking, but because these divisions were massive and the fighting took place over years, they were continually replenished with fresh troops. They were battered, sure, but they were never completely wiped off the map in a single catastrophic moment. So what does a unit's total collapse actually look like? Seriously, imagine what happens when a unit isn't just worn down over years of deployments, but mathematically erased from the battlefield in a single operation. What would you have done if you were standing in their ranks? Well, we are about to start a countdown of the most catastrophic percentage losses in U.S. history. And trust me, the numbers you are about to see— watch the numbers climb. The escalation of this devastation is going to blow your mind. As we kick off our countdown, remember that every single digit here represents a life forever changed. We start in the bitter cold of World War II, where a seemingly low percentage actually triggered total chaos. In January 1944, the 36th Infantry Division attempted a brutal attack across the Garda River in Italy. Out of 6,000 men, 1,681 became casualties in just 2 days. That's a casualty rate of 28%. Now, 28% might not sound like total annihilation to you, but militarily, it destroyed 2 entire regiments and was so bad it triggered a formal congressional investigation. But to see this percentage skyrocket, we have to travel further back in time. Which brings us to the Gettysburg Sacrifice and the legendary, tragic story of the 1st Minnesota. We're moving now to a much darker day in American history, where the concept of a suicidal charge became terrifyingly real. The 1st Minnesota Infantry Regiment enlisted in April 1861, expecting a standard tour of duty. But on the 2nd day of the Battle of Gettysburg, July 2nd, 1863, they were given an impossible order: charge directly into a gap in the Union line to stall a massive Confederate advance. They knew they were vastly outnumbered. They knew it was a sacrifice just to buy time for the rest of the army. The result? In just one single day of combat, out of the 262 men who stood at morning muster, 215 fell. That is a staggering 82% casualty rate. By sunset, only 47 survivors were left standing. An 82% loss in just a few hours is almost incomprehensible. Do you think the world would look different today if those brave men hadn't held the line right then and there? Yet, Incredibly, this still isn't the highest loss on our list. The biggest reveal is still coming. So how could a loss possibly get worse than Gettysburg? Let's talk about the Ranger disaster of 1944 at the Battle of Cisterna. To find out how the numbers get even crazier, we pivot back to World War II, specifically to some of the most elite, highly trained forces the United States had ever produced. The date is January 30, 1944. We are back in Italy. The 1st, 3rd, and 4th Ranger battalions are sent on this incredibly daring infiltration mission. But it was a trap. They walked straight into a massive, heavily armored German ambush. Out of the 767 highly trained Rangers who went into that fight, a jaw-dropping 761 became casualties in a single day of combat. Only 6 men slipped through the enemy lines. Just 6. That is a 99% casualty rate. The 1st, 3rd, and 4th Ranger battalions were completely destroyed as fighting forces right then and there. A 99% loss is absolute, unmitigated devastation. It's hard for the human brain to even process. You're probably wondering, how could any battle in history possibly surpass this near-total annihilation? Well, remember how I said the deadliest battle in U.S. history happened before the 19th century even began? It's finally— Get ready for America's deadliest defeat. An event so shocking, it was practically swept under the rug of history. Welcome to the ultimate climax of our story, a battle so devastating and so old that it has been almost entirely forgotten by the public today. The date is November 4th, 1791. The United States is barely a teenager as a nation. The 2nd Infantry Regiment, led by General Arthur St. Clair, is sent deep into the untamed wilderness. They are fighting a powerful, highly coordinated coalition of Native American tribes known as the Northwestern Confederacy. The young American troops were poorly supplied, utterly exhausted, and completely unprepared for what was waiting for them in the trees. Let's break down the horrifying math of what became known as St. Clair's defeat. 900 American troops were deployed. At dawn, the Northwestern Confederacy attacked. In just one single day of combat, an astonishing 632 soldiers were outright killed in action. Another 264 were severely wounded. The entire fighting force was over. When the thick musket smoke finally cleared, 896 out of those 900 men were casualties. That delivers the ultimate mind-bending payoff of our countdown, a 99.56% casualty rate. Let that sink in for a second. 99.56%. Mathematically, it makes this the absolute deadliest defeat in the entire history of the United States military. A near-perfect, total wipeout. The destruction was so absolute, so entirely catastrophic, that it sent massive shockwaves all the way back to the young American government. In fact, the government was forced to launch its first ever Congressional Special Committee investigation just to understand how such a total slaughter was even possible. An entire unit was effectively erased from the earth in a single morning. But we can't just leave this as a bunch of math on a chalkboard. We have to look at the legacy of the fallen, well beyond the numbers. Look, it is so incredibly easy to read a historical record and get totally lost in the data and the percentages. But the real takeaway here goes far, far beyond the numbers. Whether it's a 28% loss at a freezing river in Italy, an 82% sacrifice on the fields of Gettysburg, a 99% ambush of elite Rangers, or a 99.5% annihilation in the dense wilderness of 1791, every single digit represents a real person, a person with a family, a story, and a future, forever changed by the chaotic, unforgiving reality of war. These aren't just statistics, guys. They are stories of unimaginable human endurance. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. How would the modern world react to such staggering losses today? Would modern society even tolerate a 99% casualty rate in a single battle? Tell us your exact opinion in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through history. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Dollar Chronicles. And hey, if you thought this story was incredible, wait until you see the next one. Click the next video on your screen right now.